We just talked to Bear Alexander. What kind of a difference maker can he be for your defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the size, the speed, the athleticism. I mean, you check a lot of boxes when you look at a guy like that. He's still a young player, so no, a guy we'll be excited to actually get a chance to work with come fall camp, and be a little bit banged up going into it, but we'll quickly be healthy and have a chance to, with Coach Newman, that throw him in the pool of guys, some which have played and some that haven't, but no, we're excited about Bear.
He told us that it was always USC. There was never under consideration. What was your reaction when you found out that this former 5-star prospect wants to come play for you?
Yeah, I think it's just in 2 recruiting cycles for us, whether it's high school ranks or junior college ranks. I mean, everything's obviously with college football has changed a whole lot. So we're still learning that transfer aspect of things. But what you're finding out, I think, for a lot of these guys is USC is a prime location for them. Experience maybe whether it's a college town, if they want to change the scenery, whether it's from an academic standpoint, whether it's from a football standpoint, obviously, with aspirations to play at elite level here. So it checks a lot of boxes for guys. And some guys, and not specific to Bear, but I think it's a good example. They have to go other places to kind of maybe find out what they want. And not every place has what USC has.
He said he was silently committed to you at Oklahoma. Do you recall that?
We've known Bear for a long time, and his body has changed over time in a real positive way. And he's worked his tail off. And no, we saw him. I guess maybe when he came on his trip. I think the last time we saw him was pre-COVID, so he's still a young guy back then. But no, we're excited about him.
The perception outside the program is that you're coaching for your job this season. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think 21 years in the business, I mean, I think you're coaching for your job all the time. I think, pressure comes with it. I think about whether it's at Missouri or Washington State or Ohio State or Oklahoma. I think, I don't feel any different than I have in any other of those years. There's a lot of pressure on football coaches at our level.
Do you take any part of the off season ever? Is there ever like a soul searching element to your off seasons, like studying other defenses, or is that
Absolutely.
just not something you normally?
No, I think, and I think most coaches would tell you the same thing. I mean, that's part of it. The 2 things you do is obviously, the most recent thing would be the previous year, and obviously going through that and attack it from the standpoint what you did well, what the things you need to improve on, and then you got to obviously weigh that in terms of coaching your current team. Which is really, really important that you don't get lost in the sauce of, you're not coaching the 22 team anymore in this particular instance. And the same note, you're looking at absolutely NFL film, college film, trends, as well as not just studying defenses, but offenses, obviously the opponents that you're going to play, and again, trends from that standpoint. So you're looking at all that. Is there anything that can help you, moving forward? What you don't get in the business of doing, and this takes a lot of maturity, and I've used that term, I don't know if it's the right thing to say, but I'll say it anyway, maturity and discipline. From a coaching standpoint, in terms of those, are you having the what are we changing meetings? Or are you doing what's the best thing moving forward meetings? And sometimes you got to stop, using defensive staff in particular, but also as you police yourself, is looking through, you press the pause button and say, okay, what's your intention here, right? And so, all that takes place in the offseason.
Of course, you're heading into your second fall camp. What are some aspects where you are looking to improve, or you have improved this offseason?
Yeah.
And some of the areas where you are going to leave in next year. Some of the downfall.
Say again. I'm sorry.
Some of the negatives that you're going to leave in last year and move on from.
Well, you don't carry any of the positives with you, so what you can't do is you can't, attempt to carry the negatives with you, which is a good thing, right? Year 2 was coming regardless of what year 1 was going to be, and I think part of that is having an experience at a couple different spots, whether it's taking over a defense for the 3rd time. Year 2 comes, and so what that comes with is, as everything you mentioned, some negatives and some positives. And what you got to do is you got to make sure that you are, again, disciplined in that way, and not just focus on the negative piece. A lot of teams, lost a game they didn't think they're going to lose maybe last year. That happened in every sport, including in college football, including with us. Are you going to focus on the 11 wins or the 3 losses? And so, yeah, you analyze all those things. But ultimately, what you're looking for is a tangible piece. And one of the things, are we a bigger, faster, stronger football team as we sit here today than we did a year ago at this time? Again, keep it tangible. The answer, not in my opinion, it's fact, is we are. Now we got to make sure we play more physical, we play faster, and all those things. And then also with that is make sure that we put the guys in the best situation to be successful. So all those things got to move the needle. We got to move a more consistent unit, more physical unit, tougher unit, and a unit that plays 4 quarters. And so all that has to take place this fall camp and obviously continue in the season.
Whether it's fair or not, do you think that the perception is that the defensive recruits are coming to USC through the transfer portal? It's not happening at the high school level. Why do you think that message is resonating with the transfers more than the recruits?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to either combat a narrative or create a narrative as a football coach. I mean, one of the things for us in particular is we have to make sure that we look at it through the lens, what's our current roster and how do we build it the best way. And I think it's changed over time, and obviously in the short period of time as coaches, for any college coach who tells you they got to figure it out in terms of what that model is, I promise to you they're lying. And so what that means is so much of it is still, we do so much same as in terms of the high school recruiting piece, and then all of a sudden it's this transfer window and everything's about transfers, and then that window closes and everything's about the high school guys. And so part of it is looking at it through the lens. Having not coached in the NFL, but if you look at that model, I don't think an NFL franchise would ever say we're not going to draft anybody ever. We're just going to sign free agents. And on the flip side is, I don't think they go the other way with it and say we're never going to sign a free agent. What they're trying to do is build the best roster possible based on needs and all those things. And so that's very similar for us. So I mean, I think whether it's through the portal or through high school ranks, it's bringing those guys in that we think we can develop. An older transfer has some value. A younger transfer has value as well because of the length of time you get a chance to work with them. Again, putting the best 11 guys out there, 11 guys behind them, and ultimately looking through the lens of what's best for you in the 23 season, and then obviously moving forward. What you don't do is you say, well, we're not doing transfers or we're not doing high school guys, and let's make the best roster we possibly can.
Who's competing to play safety next to Kalen?
Yeah, several guys. We, Max Williams played quite a bit a year ago for us. Was a big piece of helping us win 11 football games, and I'll stand and tell you we don't win 11 games without him. Played safety, played nickel, battled through injuries, played dime for us, which essentially is will linebacker. So Max had an opportunity to compete at that spot. Bryson Shaw as well, who wasn't with us until kind of midway through the season, I guess on the front end of the season, but didn't have fall camp with us or last spring with us, and showed well at times. We'll have a chance to Zion Branch was a guy that was injured all last year. A young player that we're awfully excited about in the previous recruiting class that didn't have a chance to play. And then Christian Pierce coming in as a young guy as well. And one of the messages to the secondary guys is regardless of position, we're going to put the best 5 guys out there. We weren't able to necessarily do that as much as we'd like to a year ago, whether because of injuries or numbers and some of those things. But ultimately, you want to get to that point. They're all competing to be that guy.
So how does Christian Roland Wallace fit into that best 5? Could we see him at nickel?
Yeah, I mean he's a guy we're going to try at a couple different spots, and so similar message to him as all the guys is every rep you take a corner, you're competing to be the nickel. Every rep you take a nickel, you're competing to be at safety, so on and so forth. But he's a guy who will start both at the corner spot and nickel spot and kind of get a chance to evaluate from that.
Thank you.
Take over big last year. How do you kind of build on getting 19 receptions and having the first fumble away?
So there were some positives. Leading the country, in turnover margin. I mean, one of the things we talk to the guys about is takeaways equal victory, and we say that because it's true. We won the turnover battle 11 times last year. We won 11 football games and didn't 3 times, and so it went the other way. And so I think it's proof positive to the guys in terms of some of the things that we preach. I think it's something that is consistent across not just at USC but across football, and so that's something that's obviously a major emphasis for us. And I think, like I said, the proof's of the pudding in terms of the impact it can have on games, and then also too the impact it can have from an offensive standpoint, stealing possessions to give our offense, and finding ways obviously to get off the field. That's the natural piece, but also just the steal possession that we give to the offense. It's critical, and it will never ever go away in this sport.
You said it's important to kind of realize you're not coaching the 2022 group anymore.
Yeah.
When it comes to coaching the 23 group, what are some of the things you've done differently or approaches that you've changed kind of going into this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, probably more same as than different. I think that's the natural piece of, when you come in year 1 into year 2, you're looking at everything, like we continue to talk about. Is what can we enhance? What can we change? Again, if it's just in the name of changing something, throw something against the wall and see if this thing's going to work, then we're probably not prepared to be in this position to build a program at USC. You're not in the business of being realistic, but in the same portion of it, you got to make sure that again, you give the guys credit for the successes that they have, and be very realistic about the deficiencies, and then also understand it's a punitive system, and so meaning sport is. So someone's to blame, and then you take ownership in that as a coach, and continue to move forward. But no, you look at everything. I mean, what did we change? We're going to put 11 guys out there. We're going to fight for the football in every single snap. I think obviously as time goes on and evaluating these guys, can we lean in certain directions? What a 4-man front, 3-man front, man coverage versus zone coverage. I think all that stuff's still being decided. We like to think of ourselves being multiple that way. I certainly think as you look at last year, I will say this: is there certain things that in year one you want to limit your package as best that you can to give these guys a chance to be successful. On the same token, you look at it through the lens of, did you ask them to do too much? It can't be both, and in some instances it certainly was. But so no, everything's obviously on the table moving forward. But the big picture stuff in terms of who you want to be, what you want to be. Did we succeed that in year one? No, but that piece doesn't change. You want to be an aggressive defense. You want body on body and coverage, and you want to be affect the passer. Especially with the type of quarterbacks that we face here. So no, probably more same as than different.
The overall increase in depth, how does that change the complexion of what you're working with and what you can do?
Yeah, I think it just creates a little bit more competitiveness in the room across the board. I think it creates a situation, and then some is just the maturity level of the guys as well. Is making sure that are we having to manage guys a little bit less and be able to coach them a little bit more? And then part of that is, again, just the nature of the beast, is understanding that you got to play at a high level, or someone else could possibly take that spot. And so that can drive a lot of things from a depth standpoint. It changes conversations. If regardless of how I play on a particular day, I'm still going to find myself either in the starting lineup or on the field on Saturday. It's not a real good recipe for a successful program. So having some depth that way, and also understanding that injuries happen as well. So all that's a big piece of it. Now it's fine to have bodies. They've got to make sure from a league standpoint that these guys are not deficient in a way that would keep them off the field. So we got to make sure that we continue to develop them.
Sean was talking about the defensive line, especially getting a lot bigger over the course of the offseason. Was that a directive from you? You kind of saw how things ended last year and thought, we have to get bigger up front to really take another step?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, we call them the NFL standards. You use combine standards and say, okay, what are the attributes the NFL looks for at all positions, not just the defensive line? And that takes all opinions off of the coaching staff. What do we think a defensive lineman should be? This is USC. The expectations, the best players at our level, and our best defensive lineman was a second-round draft pick last year. That's the expectation. So we look at it through that lens. So as we educate guys, it's a pretty good place to start and saying, okay, you say you want to play that level. The best at ours should be capable of playing at that level. And so using that kind of model for the guys, I think certainly helps us. But they got to go do the work, and Coach Wiley's done a tremendous job with that. But that's the point that we continue to drive home and obviously it's got to be size, combined with the athletic piece. And then ultimately it comes down to making plays. But no, as a unit, it's stronger, it's faster. You got to assume everyone else is bigger, stronger, and faster as well. So when we do these next 30 days, we're really going to be a telltale going into the season.
When you're doing the soul searching, looking at different levels of college football, college, pro, whatever, is there anything in particular this offseason that you really kind of took a deep dive into, or found yourself especially interested in?
No, that's a good question. I mean, one of the things that we did, which was unique, and a lot of times you don't do, is we went back and watched practice. Everybody sees Saturdays, and part of it was just a reminder to us, maybe, as you evaluate game film, you're going through the cut-ups, you're saying, well, shoot, why don't we do this? Okay, well, let's watch Tuesday of game week. It provides a little bit of insight, maybe why you didn't do certain things. It again takes some discipline, and you got to rip off some band-aids to do some of those things. But you kind of remind yourself of that. And that was something new, not something that, quite frankly, ever done. I mentioned 20 years in it. I don't think we've ever done that. But that was something that kind of came to us and said, okay, let's really look at, okay, we can pretend to be surprised by Saturday's performance, which is fine. That makes you a fan. But if you're a coach on Tuesday and Wednesday, we got to make sure that that may not be the same issue, but where they're chinks in the armor that way. For instance, finishing football games. You know, if you can't put together a Tuesday and Wednesday on 2 hours on the practice field versus a scout team, it's going to be really hard to play 60 minutes against an elite opponent. As you talk about championship games and bowl games and some of those things. So they did a major deep dive that way, among others, as with some NFL programs as well.
What did you learn from watching practice?
We got to get better. The consistency aspect of things got to show up. I mean, and a lot of things in the moment you know, but you got to remind yourself of. I guess is the most appropriate way. And we also showed our defensive leaders that. We said we can get bigger, faster, and stronger. We can make any adjustments that we want. Again, lean on certain coverages versus other coverages. But if we show up on a game we can practice and tear down trust amongst us, then it becomes a really difficult task. And it's going to be a real confident group for 60 minutes on Saturday, especially when things start flying and obviously you play good opponents in that, and you never be perfect on Saturday. But and that was hopefully a big moment for our guys and something to continue to talk about, which applies obviously in spring football, fall camp, but ultimately when you get into the season.
And then speaking of defensive leaders, you elected to have Mason Cobb go to Pac-12 Media Day. What does that say about the impact he's made already?
Yeah, he's a real shot in the arm for us in spring football. A guy that you talk about kind of that run and hit factor, a guy that wants to be around the football, a guy that you don't have to convince to go hard, right? Can help you, and obviously a guy that's played a lot of football, so kind of made a real statement in those 15 days in particular. And then obviously that's also in the weight room and all the workouts and all those things. So excited about Mason.
Given that you were prompted to go even deeper in the review and look at practices from last year, did you say that the end of last season was the most frustrating stretch you've had as a coach?
Oh, I think it's all frustrating. I mean, I've been very, very fortunate to be on the positive side on a lot more Saturdays than I've been on the negative side, and that's which makes sense. And obviously, it doesn't make sense when it's on the negative side. It's hard to reconcile some of those things. But that's part of it. But along those same lines, I think the most frustrating part, and we had conversations, not all of us, but a lot of us, on Saturday game days after games and talking about fourth quarters. And the frustration. I don't remember being real excited after 11 wins last year either, because the last 15 minutes stings you. And so that's part of it too. Is just looking through the lens where you sometimes you feel like the boy who cried wolf. You say, well, if we don't finish football games, it's going to impact us. And we really struggled in the fourth quarter last year. We did, and part of that's maturity, part of that's understanding what it takes to win, learning how to win, and part of that is the mental resilience part, but. I think 10 points on average in the fourth quarter. You just go statistically, you look at that, you can't be obviously a good statistical defense if you do some of those things. 120 yards a game in the fourth quarter. And again, it doesn't matter. Well, it doesn't matter if you end up on the right side of it, but eventually it does. 3 football games we lost, all lost in the fourth quarter. 17 points a game in the fourth quarter in our final 3 ball games. 17 points a game. That's a statement. 14 points a game on the road in the fourth quarter. It's very hard to be statistically very good, and it's hard to win 11 football games, and somehow we did. And so that's something that, believe me, the message is being delivered. The message necessarily it has not been received at that point, but that's a message that never goes away. That wasn't specific to one season. You can go through every team in college football and by and large in the National Football League as well and say a lot of their season was predicated on how they played in the fourth quarter. And so part of that, too, goes back to the habitual piece, going back to the habits. If you have good habits over the course of time, it can go real positive for you. If you have bad habits, eventually they catch up to you. Or when you develop those, that's on the practice field and those things. So that absolutely frustrating. But it wasn't limited to just that. I mean, there's a lot that over the course of the season that we look back on and say, okay, we got to correct those things.
There's factors that you can define for playing in the fourth quarter, right? Just having more numbers. Coach Newell talked about defensive line. Maybe that's one thing that helps. There's experience. What about the thing that you can't give guys? Like when you look at this team and this group, how much are you seeing of that? What are the signs? Because part of that fourth quarter is they got to just go do it at some point, right?
Right, and some of number one, you make it an emphasis. I mean, and believe me, it was, and we were in the. Also, I think it's an understanding of guys that, what it takes to win. I mean, I think when you maybe didn't win a whole lot prior to that's can be new. I don't think that's unique to a first-year program to have some of those struggles. But also, again, it's not limited to a first-year program. I mean, there's been conversations over the years. Every place I've ever coached, we've had that conversation about the fourth quarter. Man, the 15 minutes can change your career. 15 minutes can change a season, and what I guess call it a positive, but only if the message is received, is now we have a visual and we say, okay, listen, now if we don't play 60-minute football games, you cannot be a champion in college football. It will not happen. And so, again, part of it's the messaging, part of it's getting the point driven across, and again, go back to the habit piece. I mean, again, when the habits are right and it's something that's consistent in you, then it doesn't matter if whatever the scoreboard reads, whether it's on the positive side, negative side, 30 minutes go in the game, 10 minutes go in the first quarter, whatever it is, shouldn't impact your performance. So that's a challenge for you.
I know you have you have a whole training camp left to figure this stuff out, but I'm just curious, how much cross training do you expect to do on the back end, and how confident are you at this moment that you might have an idea about how the pieces fit?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough as a coach in this time of year because everybody's excited, right? Because you haven't played a game in a long time, and so, I think to say that we're an excited coaching staff would be an understatement. I think to say that we're a confident group would be an understatement in terms of the group we have coming back. I think the ability to cross-train guys will present itself over time. We'd like to be able to. By and large, I think about the best DBs I've ever been around have been guys that if you told them to go play nickel, they could play nickel, safety, and vice versa, and on and on again. I think it's the same thing that applies to linebacker or D-line and all those things. Trying to get the 11 best guys out there. You don't want anybody to be a starter for you in a position to play on Saturdays by default. And so we got all those things got to take place. But certainly very, very excited about going into this training camp.
I'm going to steal them away now.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.